we were cooperating with them. We have nothing to hide. Come in, do whatever you have to do, and eventually we're moving on.
The RCMP is interviewing witnesses as part of its investigation into the Ford government's cancelled $8 billion Greenbelt land swap. The plan was to open up environmentally protected lands to development. Ford eventually scrapped the plan. That was after a scathing Auditor General's report found developers connected to Ford's progressive conservatives had been, quote, favoured in the process. The Toronto Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Rob Benzie broke this story, and he joins me now. Hello, Rob, and welcome to Power and Politics.
Hi, Brett.
So, early August, typically not the most active period in Canadian politics, but it seems the Mounties have been busy with their Greenbelt probe. Who exactly are they interviewing now, and why?
Well, they're interviewing current and former staffers in Premier Doug Ford's government. And Brett, remember, this stems back to actually a year ago today when the Auditor General of Ontario, Bonnie Lysyk, the then Auditor General, issued a report that found the $8.28 billion Greenbelt land swap was pretty sus, as my children would say. And she said that certain developers with links to the progressive conservative government were, quote unquote, favored when Ford's government in 2022 removed 15 properties from the Greenbelt. And the Greenbelt, for people outside the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, is a 2 million acre swath around the city and the suburbs that's designed to prevent urban sprawl. Ford's government had always promised to preserve it, and then they decided to remove 7,400 acres to build housing. The province, like every province in Canada, has a bit of a housing crisis. So to build new homes, they agreed to open up these 15 properties. Now, 8 of those properties, according to an investigation that the Star and the Narwhal did jointly, found that were sold since Ford, or sold or purchased since Ford took office in 2018. So that also raised eyebrows. Mm-hmm. So, and the claim at the time was that a staffer in Ford's housing minister's office, the chief of staff to the then housing minister, was supposedly picking these 15 properties himself. And that's it's not exactly the way it seems to be rolling out, but 2 cabinet ministers have left cabinet, and 2 senior staffers have left the government since this erupted. And last September, Ford announced that he would cancel the Greenbelt. But a month later, the RCMP said, yeah, you may have canceled the Greenbelt, we're still investigating. Mm-hmm. And that's where we are today.
Well, you mentioned staffers, cabinet ministers. A big question around this whole scandal is what the Premier's office may have known, if anything, and when. So what are you hearing about whether or not the Premier himself has been questioned yet?
Now, sources have told us that the Premier himself has not met with the police. He has always said he would be willing to cooperate and would be happy to meet with the police. They haven't yet reached out to him. I gather that the police are using as a template for their investigation, at least the folks that they're questioning, a separate report that was done by J. David Wake, the Integrity Commissioner of Ontario. So there were 2 separate reports last August, one by the Auditor General, the other by the Integrity Commissioner looking into this. And the Integrity Commissioner, his report was about twice as long as Bonnie Lysyk's report, and he interviewed 62 different witnesses, and I gather some of those witnesses are now being interviewed by the RCMP.
So perhaps early in the investigation, perhaps it's a little bit further along. I understand Ford held a press conference today, and he was asked about this. What did he have to say in response?
I mean, he said, "Look, I've got nothing to hide." So he's basically said, "Bring it on," and that's what his office said when I went to them this morning with the revelation that staffers had been meeting with the police here in Toronto. So I think that he's been consistent all along and said that he wants to clear the air. He's acknowledged that he made a mistake when he opened up the Greenbelt in the first place. He reversed it. And the interesting thing, Brett, is this time last year, Mr. Ford's government was at 34% in the polls, which is really low in Ontario, and he wouldn't have been reelected with that low a number. A year later, he's at 44% in the Abacus data poll that the Star runs every month. And in part, it's because he has kind of put things like the Greenbelt behind him, and voters, for whatever reason, he seemed to think that the Premier is coated in Teflon because stuff just hasn't been sticking to him.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that. You mentioned his polling. Ontario residents aren't supposed to go to the polls until 2026 when there's an election scheduled, but there's rumors that the Premier might or is considering calling an early election. So why might the timing of this investigation be important?
Well, I think it is significant, Brett, because if there are charges against anyone in Ford's orbit, that would not be a really great time to go to the polls. It seems unlikely that there will be charges. If there are going to be charges, it seems unlikely that they will be before next spring. This investigation is proceeding slowly and methodically, and that's how these things work. It's a complicated case. So I think in some ways the Tories may want to get out in front of that. That's only one part of the equation, though. Another thing is that they want to be facing voters before Justin Trudeau's Liberals face voters, because Ford's government, even though it's a progressive conservative government, works very, very closely with the Trudeau government. And there is a tradition in Ontario and in many other provinces of two different parties being in power federally and provincially at the same time. So when Stephen Harper was in office, the Tories federally, the Liberals under Kathleen Wynne and Dalton McGuinty were ruling at Queen's Park. So Ford's folks are concerned that if Pierre Poilievre's Tories win in the October 2025 provincial or federal election, that's going to be bad news for them in the 2026 scheduled provincial vote. So that's why they're looking at it. There's a lot of three-dimensional chess going on here. And there are other factors, including that if Poilievre's Tories win and they decide to cancel some of the electric vehicle subsidies that Trudeau has done, that Ford has worked on him with, that would be very, very bad politically for Mr. Ford's government. So there are lots of moving parts here. The Greenbelt investigation is just one of them.
Three-dimensional chess indeed. Toronto Star Queen's Park Bureau Chief Rob Benzie, thanks for bringing us up to speed on this.
See you later, Brett.